My name is Eli Turner. I'm 23, living just outside a small town in Arizona. Ever since I could remember, I've had a deep love for cars. Growing up, I spent more time tinkering with engines and playing in my uncle's garage than anything else. It wasn't because I didn't enjoy school or hanging out with friends. It was simply because the hum of an engine made more sense to me than most things in life. It was a warm Friday evening in late summer, the kind where the sun kisses the horizon, making the sky look unreal. I was heading back home from another long day of work at my uncle's garage. I had the windows down, the radio cranked up, and my mind in a pleasant daze. The roads were open, no traffic in sight, and I was cruising a little over the speed limit. Nothing crazy, just a few miles. It was the kind of drive where you could easily lose yourself in thought, the wind and music becoming your only company. But then, I noticed the flashing lights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought maybe it was someone passing me, but then I heard the siren. A quick, sharp chirp, clearly meant for me. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled over, feeling that all too familiar mix of nerves and uncertainty. I wasn't speeding by much, maybe 5 miles over the limit, but it was enough to get the officer's attention. As I turned off the engine and rolled down the window, I took a deep breath and waited. When the officer approached, I could see she carried herself with confidence. She had dark brown hair tied back in a neat bun, and dark sunglasses shielded her eyes, even though the sun was starting to dip low in the sky. She had the posture of someone who wasn't here to play around. She leaned in slightly and introduced herself. Evening. Officer Emma Stone, can I see your license and registration, please? I handed over my papers, still trying to shake off the lingering nerves. Was I speeding? I asked, trying to sound casual. Emma glanced at her cruiser and then back at me. You were doing 47 in a 40, she said, her voice calm and professional. Technically, yes, but it's a common mistake, I chuckled nervously. I didn't even realize. She cracked a small smile. You and everyone else, she replied. Sit tight. She walked back to her cruiser, and I sat there tapping my fingers on the wheel, already imagining the worst-case scenario. I had no idea what a ticket would cost, but I knew my uncle would be less than thrilled if I had to borrow more money. I could already feel the sting of his disapproval. A few minutes later, Emma returned. But instead of holding a ticket, she handed me a small folded note. I should write you up, but instead, I'm giving you this, she said, her face remaining calm and steady. I stared at her, completely confused. For a moment, I might have misheard her, but when I looked at her face, she wasn't joking. She wasn't even smirking. She was dead serious. You're giving me your number? I asked, still incredulous. Emma nodded, handing me the folded piece of paper. You seem like a decent guy. Honestly, I've never done this before, but I felt like you were someone worth taking a chance on. I'm not asking for anything, just if you want to call? I took the paper from her, completely stunned. Okay, I said, still trying to process what was happening. Have a good evening, Eli, Emma said, giving me a small nod before walking back to her cruiser. My fingers hovered over the steering wheel as I sat there, staring at the note. What the hell had just happened? I couldn't even get my head straight. A cop, one I didn't even know, just handed me her number. It didn't make any sense. It didn't fit with anything I learned about the world. I pulled back onto the road, still in a bit of a fog. I didn't turn the music back on, and I didn't really even pay attention to the road. I just kept glancing down at the note resting on the passenger seat. It didn't feel like a prank, but I couldn't shake the doubt. Was she testing me? Was she trying to mess with me? I couldn't figure it out. I kept the note folded up and tucked it into my glove box, unsure what to do. For the next 2 days, every time I got into my truck, I glanced at it. Call her? Don't call her? I kept debating with myself. It wasn't that I didn't want to call her. Hell, I wanted to. However, I didn't know if it was just a setup. By Sunday night, after too much pacing and self-doubt, I finally caved. I told myself, what's the worst that could happen? I dialed the number, feeling the nerves course through my body. The phone rang a few times before she answered. Hello? Her voice was calm, just like it had been when she stopped me. Hey, this is Eli. You pulled me over the other day, I said, nervously stumbling over my words. She paused for a moment, then responded with a laugh. I know who you are, Eli. I didn't think you'd actually call. I relaxed a little, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to call, I admitted. I thought maybe you were just messing with me, she laughed again, this time low and confident. If I were messing with you, I would have just given you the ticket. Fair enough, I said with a chuckle. I could hear the ease in her voice, and suddenly all the worry I'd felt faded. We talked for a while about nothing in particular, how my week had been, what she did on her days off, and how much I'd second-guessed calling her. Eventually, the conversation shifted, and I asked, why me? There was no hesitation in her response. You just seem like someone real, she said. Most guys I stop either lie or argue. But you were honest, and I don't know. Something about you just felt grounded. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never been called real before, and it hit me harder than I expected. Well, I'm glad you thought that, I finally said, trying to sound casual. Emma smiled through the phone. Do you want to meet up? No tickets involved, just coffee. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, where? She named a diner just outside of town, a quiet spot where she could blend in without being recognized. We agreed on a time and hung up, both of us feeling a little lighter than before. The next day, I spent a solid 20 minutes ironing my shirt. It was just a casual dinner date, but something about this felt different. I had never put this much effort into a simple shirt, but today it mattered. I was about to meet the woman who had given me her phone number under the strangest of circumstances. Maybe it was the whole she's a cop thing, or maybe it was that I had never felt such an immediate connection to someone. My cousin Nate was over watching the game, and when he saw me fixing my hair, he shot me a look. "You acting like it's prom night or something?" he teased. I grinned, feeling the nerves hit me in full force. "Feels like it," I muttered. I wasn't sure if it was excitement, nerves, or a strange mix of both, but there was a jittery energy running through me as I climbed into my truck and headed out to the diner. I could feel the weight of that folded note in my pocket, Emma's number, and I realized just how much it was consuming my thoughts. I had no idea how this would turn out, but a part of me couldn't help but be excited to see where this went. The diner was a quiet little place on the outskirts of town, one of those hidden gems that didn't attract much attention. It was the kind of place where people didn't stare when you walked in, where the food was good and the coffee was strong. As I parked, I noticed Emma was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, her dark hair cascading around her shoulders, and her leather jacket giving her an effortless, cool vibe. When she saw me, she stood up, and for a second, everything around me seemed to blur out. Her smile was enough to make my heart skip a beat, and it only made me more nervous. I walked toward her, trying to act calm even though my mind was racing. "Took you long enough?" she said, her smile teasing but warm. "I had to build up the courage," I replied, feeling more relaxed the moment I heard her laugh. We slid into the booth across from each other, and I ordered coffee, trying to keep the conversation light. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no awkwardness, no forced small talk. We simply talked about our days, the things that mattered, and the things that didn't. The conversation flowed easily, and I couldn't help but notice how easy it was to be around her. Emma told me about her life, her days at the academy, how she had been the only woman in her training class, and the time she broke her nose during a drill but didn't tell anyone until after her shift. "You get used to the rough stuff," she said, a slight shrug in her shoulders. "People underestimate you until they don't, but I don't mind. I'd rather surprise them." I admired her strength and resilience. She wasn't just a cop. She was someone who had built her life on her own terms, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. As we talked, I realized that she wasn't just tough. She was genuine. She shook her head. "Nope, you're the first," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. That caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say to that, but I could feel the sincerity in her words. For a moment, there was a quiet between us, the kind that spoke volumes without saying a word. "So, what now?" I asked, unsure of where to go next. Emma leaned back, her eyes meeting mine, and for a split second I saw something in them, something unspoken. Then she said, "I think you've earned a second date." The words hung in the air like a promise. And just like that, I knew this wasn't just some random encounter. There was something real here. We started seeing each other regularly after that. The next time we met up, it was for coffee at a small downtown cafe. No uniforms, no ticket, just us. I couldn't help but feel how different this was from anything I'd ever known. I had always been a creature of habit. Same friends, same routine, same small town life. But Emma was a force that was slowly changing that. I was still getting used to the idea that I was dating a cop. It wasn't the badge that made her special. It was the person beneath it. She wasn't looking for anything flashy, no expensive dinners or grand gestures. What she wanted was something real. And that, for me, was more than enough. We spent hours at that cafe, talking about everything from silly things like our favorite foods to deeper conversations about our pasts. She told me about her childhood, how she grew up in a small town just outside Dallas, Texas. She had always wanted to be a cop, even when people told her it was a man's job. She had worked hard to get to where she was, and she wasn't about to let anyone stop her. But even with all the strength and confidence she exuded, Emma had her own vulnerabilities. She wasn't perfect. She told me about the hardest days on the job, the ones that left her questioning her choices. There were times when she wondered if she was making a difference, if it was all worth it. But in the same breath, she would tell me about the moments that reminded her why she became a cop in the first place, when someone called her a lifesaver, or when she was able to make a difference in someone's life. I admired that about her. She wasn't just a person who showed up to do her job. She was someone who genuinely cared about the people around her, someone who wasn't afraid to show that caring side, even though the world often made her put up walls. As we left the cafe that evening, I realized how much I was beginning to care about her. It wasn't just the way she made me feel, it was everything about her. Her strength, her kindness, her authenticity. She wasn't pretending to be anything she wasn't, and I couldn't help but find that refreshing. Chapter 4. A New Beginning. One night, after a few more dates, Emma invited me over to her apartment. She had a small, cozy place on the outskirts of town, a short drive from the diner where we'd first met. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it had a warmth to it, something that made it feel like home. When I arrived, Emma was already in her sweats, her badge resting on the table beside her. I smiled at the sight of her, relaxed and at ease, no longer the tough cop persona she wore for the world. She was just Emma, someone I was starting to care about deeply. She made us dinner, burgers and fries, and we sat on the couch, eating in silence for a while. The TV was on, but we weren't paying attention to it. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we were together in a moment that felt like a small piece of peace in the chaos of life. "Are you tired?" I asked, glancing at her as she leaned her head against my shoulder. She sighed, a little chuckle escaping her lips. "Exhausted, but I'm okay." And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just about the dates or the coffee shop moments. It wasn't about the way she looked or the way she made me feel special. It was about the quiet moments, the ones where we didn't need to say anything, where we simply existed together, side by side, building something real. Later that night, as Emma fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, I didn't move. I didn't want to disturb her. I just sat there, letting the moment out longer than it probably should have. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to figure it out. With Emma by my side, I felt like I was right where I was meant to be. The days passed in a blur, yet they felt full of purpose. I wasn't sure what it was about Emma, but every moment with her felt like it mattered. We weren't rushing into anything. We were simply letting things unfold at their own pace. And it was more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. As the weeks passed, I began to understand the balance of our lives. Emma's job kept her busy, working nights and weekends, while I spent most of my time fixing cars in my uncle's garage. But despite our schedules, we made it work. It wasn't always easy. She'd text me from her cruiser in the middle of a shift, and I'd send her memes while I was elbow-deep in engine grease, but it felt like a partnership. We supported each other in our own ways, even if we couldn't always be together physically. One evening, I texted her about a new car I had been working on, a 1969 Camaro that had come in for restoration. It was a beautiful piece of machinery, and I was taking my time with it, making sure every part was perfect. I wasn't sure if she would care, but when she replied, "How's the Camaro coming along? You getting it back to its prime?" I realized that she actually did care. "Getting close," I replied. "I think it's going to be a beauty when it's done." "You know I'm a sucker for classic cars," she said with a smiley face. "Can't wait to see it." Those little moments of connection, like a text or a random phone call just to check in, became more important than anything. I could feel how much Emma valued the simple things, the times when we didn't have to impress each other or do something grand. It was enough just to know we were in each other's lives. A few weeks later, I took a leap of faith and did something that scared the hell out of me. I signed a lease for a small auto shop. It wasn't much, just a 2-bay garage on the other side of town, but it was mine. I had drained most of my savings to make it happen, and I knew that it was a risk, but it felt like the right move. I had spent years working with my uncle, learning everything I could, but it was time to step out on my own. When I told Emma, she was excited but also cautious. "You're going to make it work, Eli. I know you are," she said, wrapping me in a hug. "But don't forget to take care of yourself, too." That was one of the things I loved most about her. She wasn't just about the big picture. She cared about the details, the ones that made life worth living. She cared about me in a way that I had never experienced before. I spent the next few days setting up the shop, getting everything in order. I was excited, but the pressure was real. I didn't have any employees yet, just me and my tools. But I was determined to make it succeed. Emma's support never wavered. She would drop by when she could, bringing me coffee or just checking in to see how things were going. It wasn't much, but it meant everything to me. Every time I saw her walk through that door, a little more confidence filled me, and I knew that I wasn't alone in this. Months passed, and things started to fall into place. The garage was picking up, and Emma and I were getting closer. We spent more time together, going on small weekend trips, walking around town, and enjoying the simplicity of being with each other. It wasn't always easy, especially with her long shifts, but we made it work. We always made time for one another. One weekend, after a particularly long stretch of shifts for both of us, Emma suggested a quick getaway. "How about we take a drive?" she asked. No phones, no distractions, just us and the road. It didn't take much convincing. We packed a bag, hopped in her car, and hit the road, heading for the mountains. The air was cool, the streets were empty, and for the first time in what felt like ages, we didn't have a single worry. We were just two people on a journey, and it felt right. We found a scenic overlook, and as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Emma stood there, arms crossed, gazing out at the view. The world seemed to slow down in that moment, and I knew I had to say something. I reached into my bag, feeling the small box in my pocket that I had been carrying for weeks, not sure when the right moment would come. I walked up beside her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Emma," I said, my voice low but steady. She turned to face me, and for a moment, everything around us disappeared. It was just the two of us, standing there, surrounded by the beauty of the mountains and the quiet of the world. I wasn't planning on doing this today, or even here, but the truth is, ever since you pulled me over, nothing has felt random. Everything about us has felt like it was meant to be. I opened the box, revealing a simple ring, nothing flashy, just something that felt right for us. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you were right to take a chance on me. Will you marry me? Emma blinked, clearly taken aback, but her lips trembled into a smile. You're insane, she whispered, though I could see the tears welling in her eyes. I smiled. Yeah, probably, but I've never been more sure of anything. She took the ring, her hands shaking slightly as she slipped it on. Then, without another word, she kissed me. It wasn't a dramatic kiss, but it was everything I had hoped for. When she pulled back, she whispered softly, Yes, and just like that, we weren't just dating anymore. We were building something more permanent, something that would last. The next few months passed in a blur of excitement and anticipation. Emma and I had a small, intimate wedding, just the way we wanted. It was held in her sister's backyard with a few dozen close friends and family. Nothing extravagant, just a gathering of people who mattered. Her sister Devon had been a little skeptical about me at first, but by the time the wedding rolled around, she had come around. In fact, she gave me a nod of approval as I stood at the altar. She didn't have to say anything. I knew she was on my side. Karen, her mother, was there too, but Emma was the one who stood out the most. She looked radiant, as if she were exactly where she was meant to be. She wore a simple white dress, and tucked into her bouquet was her badge, for luck. Her vows were short, but heartfelt. You weren't supposed to be in my lane that day, she said, but I'm glad you were. I didn't try to be poetic. I just told her the truth. I never knew what I was looking for until I saw you standing at my window, holding a citation you never gave me. We danced barefoot in the grass that evening, and everything felt perfect, even if it wasn't. It wasn't about the venue or the decorations. It was about us. After the whirlwind of the wedding, Emma and I settled into what felt like a new, beautiful routine. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Emma's job with this police force kept her busy, working long nights, while I had my hands full with the auto shop. It wasn't always easy to find time for each other, but we made it work. Even if our schedules didn't line up perfectly, we'd always find small moments together, morning coffee on the porch, quiet dinners, or late-night conversations that stretched well into the early hours. The garage was doing well, better than I'd anticipated. Word got out that I was running my own business, and it began to grow. Within 6 months, I was able to hire 2 other mechanics to help with the workload. The shop had a steady flow of customers, and I could finally stop worrying about whether the rent would be paid on time. Yet, no matter how busy we both were, it was Emma who kept me grounded. She would stop by the garage during her shifts, offering coffee or a quick lunch to check in. Her presence always made the day a little brighter. We didn't need grand gestures. It was the simple, everyday moments that made me appreciate her more than I ever thought possible. One night, as I was closing up the shop, I got a text from Emma. It was late, and I knew she had just gotten off shift. I figured she was probably checking in like she always did, so I grabbed my phone and smiled when I saw her name. Eli, I think I'm late? My heart stopped for a beat. I read the message again, just to make sure I wasn't misreading it. I quickly typed back, What do you mean? Late for what? No, I mean late. As in, late? I froze. Was she telling me what I thought she was? I sat down on the steps outside the shop and stared at the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know how to respond. What does this mean? I ran my hand through my hair. Was she serious? My mind raced as I tried to process everything. Emma was always so sure, so calm, so collected. This was the first time I'd seen her even a little unsure. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. I took the test. 3 of them. All positive. I felt like I'd been hit with a ton of bricks. I dropped the phone into my lap, still sitting on the steps in stunned silence. The world felt like it had shifted, like everything I thought I knew was being turned upside down. It wasn't that I wasn't happy at the idea of becoming a father. I loved the thought of having a family with Emma. But I wasn't sure I was ready. This was a lot to take in. I typed back, Are you okay? Are you sure? She replied almost instantly, I'm fine. I'm just surprised, but I think it's going to be okay. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept running, replaying everything we'd been through, and now, this. The next step. I knew we'd been building a life together, but I hadn't expected it to happen this way. Not so suddenly. The following morning, I went over to Emma's apartment, where she was waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, looking at me with the same calm expression I'd always admired. But there was something different in her eyes now, something that said this was real. We were stepping into the unknown, together. I didn't think it was going to happen this soon, she said, her voice steady, but I could hear the undercurrent of uncertainty. I don't know what to say, I admitted. I'm still processing, she smiled softly. You don't need to say anything. I know it's a lot, but we'll figure it out. Together. I sat down beside her, reaching for her hand. You're right, we will. We'll take it one day at a time. And for the first time, I believed it. Even though I was scared out of my mind, I knew we were in this together. As the months passed, life began to settle into a new routine. We adjusted to the idea of becoming parents, each of us figuring out what that meant in our own way. Emma's shifts at the station became more flexible as she prepared for maternity leave, while I spent more time focusing on the shop. We found out it was a boy. I couldn't contain the excitement when I heard the news. I had always imagined having a son, though I never expected it to happen this way. As I began preparing the nursery with Emma, I realized how much our lives were truly changing. Even with all the chaos of preparing for the baby, we never stopped making time for each other. I would come home after long days at the shop to find Emma sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, just waiting for me. We had become experts at balancing our individual lives with our shared ones. She was still the confident, grounded woman I had first met, but now I saw a new side of her, one that was softer, more vulnerable. It was like we were both learning how to be partners in every sense of the word. The night our son was born, the hospital room was filled with a calm, electric energy. The waiting was over, and our lives were about to change forever. I had no idea what to expect. I was nervous, anxious, and incredibly excited. Emma was calm as ever. She had always been strong, and this moment, this defining moment, was no different. She was a rock, even as the pain of labor became more intense. I held her hand, whispering to her, telling her how strong she was, how proud I was of her. Hours later, our son, Eli Maddox Turner, came into the world. The doctor handed him to Emma, and in that moment it felt like time stopped. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she gazed down at him, and I saw something in her expression that I had never seen before, a deep, overwhelming love. I knew that this little boy would change everything. He had already changed us. We brought Eli home a few days later, the quiet stillness of the house now filled with the sounds of his soft cries. We had a new routine, one that revolved around diaper changes, feedings, and sleepless nights. But in the chaos of it all, we laughed more than we ever had. As we sat on the porch one morning, with Eli asleep in his crib inside, Emma looked at me and smiled. "Can you believe this?" she said softly. "Our family." I looked at her, at the life we had built, and knew that everything had led to this moment. The unexpected detour, the traffic stop that changed our lives, had brought us here. "No," I said with a grin, "but I wouldn't change a thing." The months after Eli Jr. was born were a blur of sleepless nights and new experiences. Emma and I learned the ropes of parenthood together, each of us stepping up in our own way. The auto shop continued to thrive, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had it all: family, purpose, and a sense of fulfillment. The bond between Emma and me deepened in ways I never thought possible. We weren't just partners in marriage anymore. We were partners in life. Every day we built something real: a family, a home, a future. And every day I thanked the universe for the chance encounter that brought us together.